Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Understanding Sensory Processing Disorder webinar. My name is Libby Snyder, and I'm really looking forward to presenting this webinar for you. I just want to make sure that people have a little bit more time to sign in before we begin. So please have some patience, and I will join you in a few minutes. Thanks. Take care.
Hi, everybody. I just want to make sure that you're seeing the right slide. You can look at on the side there on your control panel, you'll see questions. If you see just a single slide that says Understanding Sensory Processing Disorder presented by Libby Snyder, if you just see that one slide, can you just write down in the question box, say yes? Okay, Julia, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, we're going to start in a minute.
Okay, so it looks like it slowed down in people signing in. So let's get started. I wanted to make sure that I make this statement before I even begin, because when professionals speak about sensory processing disorder, we often shorten it to SPD. So during the presentation, I will be using them intermittently, but because sensory processing disorder is so big, it takes up time and it takes up effort. So SPD is what I'll probably use most of the time. Okay, please be sure that I need to go through the attendance credits, pre and post test, and the evaluations as usual. All ELC Broward trainings are for in-service hours only. Your training certificate will be emailed within 24 hours and sent to your email address that you entered in your registration. In order to be marked as attended, you must log in on the computer or download the GoToWebinar app on your phone. Just calling does not register attendance, and you will not receive a certificate or be marked as attended. If you can't see the screen, we can't see you. And starting July 1st, all trainings will have a pre-test of 3 questions to answer when you register. And upon completion of the training, a post-test of 3 questions and a training survey of 5 questions will launch. Please complete all the information. Please be sure that you do answer the post-test and the training survey questions. Both of these will automatic, and I want to make sure that we get your feedback. It's important to us to know how we can improve or what we can do to, or if you liked it. Either way, we'd like to hear from you. And next, housekeeping. Housekeeping, we have the question box. I'm sure most of you know how to handle it, but I want to make sure that any newcomers are able to. So the question, you click on the chat icon at the top of the toolbar. Use the Send drop-down menu to select your recipient of a message. Now, if you pick everyone, that means every participant is going to see your message in the question box. Now, when you click on the question box, what you'll find is that there will be a bar at the bottom of the question box where you can type in your questions. Now, the wonderful thing is that I have, and you can, and I was hoping in that download, in the handouts that I would have them, but we've had a technical difficulty. So hopefully we'll be able to send those out to you through an email. Now, if you need to raise your hand, if you look on the top left-hand side, there is a picture of a hand with a green arrow that goes up or it goes down when it's red. If you want to say something, you can click on the hand and the green arrow will show that you are, you can ask a question and raise your hand. But please be sure to click it again to unraise your hand when we've already addressed it, so that we will know that you have been addressed. And I wanted to introduce the amazing and super talented Debbie Kay, who is going to handle the question box for me today, because it is really difficult for me to manage the question box at the same time that I am presenting. Debbie will answer your questions as they come in and will share anything she would like me to answer and wants to share. And I love that she has permission, and I really appreciate the fact that she might interrupt me during the time so that we can address anything in a timely manner. Thank you so much, Debbie. I really appreciate your support.
My pleasure. Enjoy the training, everyone.
You're amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me. I don't know if some of you know me or not, but Debbie, you can move there we go. I have a bachelor's degree in special education and a master's level endorsement in early childhood special ed and a master's degree in leadership. I am a certified pre-kindergarten class observer. I have many years of experience in teaching early childhood special education, as well as working with early childhood through high school age children. And I love what I do. I am an inclusion specialist at the Early Learning Coalition of Broward County. And believe it or not, I have been married for 44 years to the most wonderful husband ever. And we are still married, believe it or not. And we're both working out of home. He's upstairs and I'm downstairs, and we meet for lunch in the middle of the day because it's amazing. And I thought it would be really hard, and it isn't, because he is an amazing man. We have 3 children and are blessed with 6 amazing grandchildren. Now, my favorite place that I like to be when I'm not working is with my families, my children and my grandchildren and my husband, or at the beach. So that's why the silly picture. That's when I just came off the beach and it was a beautiful day and I was really, really happy. Sensory processing disorder symptoms. Now we'll go into more depth in this later on as we talk, but sensory processing disorder, or SPD, is a condition in which the brain has trouble receiving and responding to information that comes in through the senses. So some children that have this difficulty have difficulties arranging their thoughts and understanding what they're feeling and what their senses are telling them. It was formerly referred to as the sensory integration dysfunction, but unfortunately it's not currently recognized as a distinct medical diagnosis, which means that it can be a challenge for people seeking help for their children and for themselves as they deal with SPD. Now, some of the symptoms, and I'll just go through a few of them because we'll be talking about them. And maybe you'll recognize some children that might demonstrate these behaviors, and you don't understand yet that these are not something that they have control over, but things that they are truly feeling, and they're having very intensive reactions to them. I hate having my hair washed or brushed or cut. I cry and shield my eyes from the sun and other bright lights. I have selective hearing or difficulty listening. Do you hear that? Difficulty listening. I am a picky eater and I resist new foods and textures. So when we try to push them, this is something that sensory-wise in their brain, they are not able to do. I complain about tags in my clothing, feeling that those tags itchy on my back or in my shorts. I seem to be unaware of normal touch or pain. I often touch others too soft or too hard. You know those kids that bump up against other children? They're looking for sensory input. I hate to be tickled. I have poor gross motor skills. I always walk on my tiptoes. I have trouble focusing and concentrating because I'm dealing with the sensory input that I'm dealing with, and I'm not able to hear and digest and understand and concentrate on what you're saying. I am overly sensitive to loud sounds like the vacuum cleaner or a blender or a loud musical instrument. I am always smelling people. Do you know a child that does that? I do. I chew on everything, the sensory input into their mouths. I have poor fine motor skills such as handwriting and cutting. I have difficulty dressing myself. I sit with my legs in the W position. Now, this doesn't mean that a child that sits with their legs in the W position has sensory processing disorder or SPD. It just means that that's one of the symptoms. And I put socks on just so, or maybe I never go barefoot. It could be one or the other. It really doesn't matter. It's different each time. Okay, I have a poll for you. It's time for a poll. I'd like to find out, how many senses do you think people without specific disabilities have? Can you, yeah, Debbie, go ahead and put the poll in. Thank you. Do you think it's 5? How many senses do most people have? 5, 6, or 7? Let's see what happens.
"56 people have voted, so we're still waiting for some more votes to come in. Come on, everybody, tell us what you're thinking."
Yep, let's go. This is going to be relevant for the rest of the training.
Okay, it looks like 63% have voted. Give everybody another few seconds. Libby, tell me when.
Let's give them another minute or two, and then we'll close it out. Okay, let's go ahead and close it out. 71% of you said it's 7. I mean, it's 5, sorry, 5. 17% said 6, and 11% said 7. So let's find out. Before I give you the correct answer, I'd like to share a video with you. I think this is a very amazing video, just that will give you an understanding of what children with SPD deal with. So after watching this video, do you want to have a second chance to answer the question? Yep. Who wants a second chance? If you want a second chance, tell me if, go ahead and go into the question box and let me know that you changed your answer and then answer the question again. How many senses do you think people have? So first, tell me if you changed your answer and then tell me how many, 5, 6, or 7 senses.
Looks like a lot of people are changing their minds to 7.
Ah, Deb, you can move on to the next one too. No, never mind. So if you did, it isn't uncommon for us to not realize that the first 5 senses, that's what we know and we've been taught at school and we have used throughout our lives. But there are 2 more, believe it or not. So we have 5 commonly known senses. The first one that I have on my list is sight, and that's how we see from our eyes. We take in what we see and we process it. The next one is hearing, how we hear the noises near us and around us, and how we recognize those sounds and how we process those to understand what's going on around us. We have smell, how we smell the aromas around us. I made beef stew the other night, and my husband walked in and said, "Oh man, this is awesome. You're making beef stew." He had not even seen the pot, but he understood that what he was smelling represented something important to him because he loves beef stew. Taste, it helps us distinguish different flavors that we put into our mouths. So when we put something in our mouths, we are able to process that and say, that is a cucumber, which my husband would not like, or it is a candy bar, or ice cream with chocolate syrup. He would love that. So those are different things that we process, what we distinguish with our taste. And then finally, touch, how we are able to identify the concrete things in our world. If we touch something, is it cold? Is it hot? What is going on? The touch is we process what we touch in order for our brain to understand what is going on. But there are more senses. One is called, and you heard it in the video, vestibular or movement. Vestibular is the movement and balance sense, which gives us information about where our head and body are in space. It helps us stay upright when we sit, stand, or walk. It's an important thing, but some people don't have the ability to process the information that we feel when our body is in space. Some of the symptoms for some of the symptoms of vestibular dysfunction include children have difficulty with attention or following instructions. They have a delay in speech or language skills. They have poor eye control. They are clumsy. They have poor postural control. Now that means they often fall from their chairs. They have poor eye-hand and eye-foot coordination, so they're clumsy again. They are unsteady when walking on the ground, unable to be held up in the air upside down or spun like tilting heads backward, when they tilt heads backward. Remember when Neil talked about that? And like, especially, you know what, when they tilt their heads back and the parent is trying, or the family member is trying to wash their hair, that can be something that can be very frightening for them. It stabilizes themselves by walking on with hands on the walls. They can't stabilize themselves. They're afraid to go downstairs because they don't have the feel of going down the stairs. That it seems obvious to risk that, it seems oblivious. They cannot even imagine the risk of heights and moving equipment. They don't get dizzy even when they have excessive spinning, or they get overly dizzy with barely any movement. Now, I want you to understand that not all children show all of the symptoms. They may have some symptoms. And it's important, and I'll probably mention this a few times, it's important for us to have a professional come in and diagnose and evaluate the children if we think that they are dealing with SPD. So some activities that could support children when dealing with the vestibular system is using a rocking chair or just rocking back and forth. You have a child that just loves to rock back and forth or rock in a rocking chair. How about swinging back and forth on a swing set? Jumping up and down, or sliding down a slide, or spinning around. Some children like it, and some children are very much upset, will get upset if they start to spin. The second, and even another less known sense, is proprioceptive sense. Proprioception is the understanding of our body's awareness sense. It tells us where our body parts are compared to others. It gives us information about how much force to use when interacting with others. You know, and I talked about bumping up to people and getting in their space, and allows us to do something like, okay, if we have proprioception, if we want to crack an egg into a bowl, but we want to do it without crushing the egg in our hands, that is something that is very difficult for some people with proprioceptive issues. Or to stand next to someone and without bumping into them or invading their space. All children need to learn how to use the proprioceptive systems, just like the other five senses. They're just like the other five senses. Some of the symptoms of proprioceptive dysfunction include moving too quickly, crashing into things, seeming lethargic or out of it, poor awareness of where their body is and how to move it smoothly, walking on tiptoes, chewing on a shirt. They get the sensory support there. Weakened muscles, they aren't using their muscles in a correct way, so they can't build up their muscles. Poor endurance or posture, they slump over, and they're clumsy. Movements are robotic, or they can be the opposite. They can be really flappy, and then they hold writing implements too tight or too loose, depending on where their proprioceptive skills are. They look with eyes to make body position adjustments, and they have a difficulty judging force and distance. They don't understand how much force they are when they are giving people when they come up and they run up to you and they smash into you, or what the distance is between their body and your body. Frequent hitting and pushing incidents because they don't understand where they are in space. That's an important thing to remember, because these things are not in their control. These are things that they do because they have SPD, sensory processing disorder. Okay, let's talk about the additional symptoms of sensory processing disorder. Debbie, go ahead. Some children react severely when dealing with sensory overload. They totally lose it. And many children have symptoms like these from time to time, but therapists consider a diagnosis of sensory processing disorder, and this is really important, only when the symptoms become severe enough to affect normal functioning and disrupt everyday life. And that is really important because there are children and adults that are dealing with sensory processing, but they're able to live their lives and not allow it to distract or disrupt their everyday life. There are other children that have other symptoms. In some children, for example, the sound of children making loud noises because they're having fun. Their reaction may be to scream during the noise, and when they are touched, they may flinch or refuse to eat food that has specific textures, such as mushy or strong taste or other food textures. Again, this is not something that they're just being stubborn about. This is something that they have physical issues with. But others may shut down and be unresponsive to everything around them. They may not respond to extreme heat or cold or even pain. They may shut down completely. And that is something that we need to be aware of too. Many children with SPD start out as fussy babies who become anxious as they grow older. These children don't often handle change well, and they may frequently throw tantrums and have meltdowns because they are completely overwhelmed, not because of any other reason, but they are overwhelmed and overstimulated. Please understand that many children display symptoms like these from time to time, but if the behaviors are consistent, therapists, not us, and I'm going to say this a few times because I want to make sure, might consider a diagnosis of CPD when the symptoms become severe to affect normal functioning and disrupt, like I said, everyday life. Now, this is causes of sensory processing disorder. They have not identified it yet, but they see signs of sensory processing disorder. This paper I tried to put into the handouts, but you will receive it in an email after we get done with the webinar. I'm not going to go through it right now, but if you look, you can see that I have trouble focusing and or concentrating. I have difficulty dressing myself. These will be reminders to you of what to look for, not to evaluate, but to see if this child is not having challenging behaviors, but is having SPD. Now, sometimes, and this is interesting to me, I thought it was really interesting, symptoms of sensory processing disorder, or SPD, there are additional overlapping systems that are caused by other disorders. Symptoms for anxiety and SPD together include sleeping difficulty, easily frustrated, irritable. They prefer to be alone. They have physical complaints. And you know what? Because of those physical complaints, they have high absenteeism from your classroom. SPD and ADHD, which is, I'm sorry, which would include easily distracted. They have a short attention span. They're impulsive and sometimes aggressive, and they move around excessively. And they have trouble listening and cannot easily complete a task. Do you know a child that has ADHD? Well, maybe. And symptoms of SPD with anxiety and ADHD include easily overwhelmed and overly stimulated, frequent meltdowns, low confidence and self-esteem, and they have difficulty making and or keeping friends, and they often tune out. They're easily distracted, and it is difficult to focus. So you can imagine how it would feel to be in the body of that child or adult. Do you know adults that demonstrate these behaviors as well, because this is not something that goes away. They can work on it, just like Neil said in the video, but it is something that they still deal with throughout their entire lives. Let's go on to autism and versus sensory processing disorder. There are two different things we're talking about. It is not uncommon for people to have been diagnosed with autism and also challenged by SPD, like our friend Neil in the video. This is when it is vital that we encourage parents to complete a referral form to see if their child needs additional services and support, and get them early intervention to provide the skills to help them. It is important to remember that not all children have SPD with autism or autism without SPD. It's something for the professionals to discern. A new study suggests, and I think this is amazing, that SPD is a standalone disorder separate from autism. These are not one disability or disorder. It's not autism versus and sensory processing disorder. They have found at the University of Southern California research team discovered that children with SPD have different deficits in brain connectivity than children with autism. The brain connectivity does not happen in the same parts of the children's brain, and therefore they are two separate disorders, not one. This we need to understand, and a lot of times, and I'll be going into it a little bit more, when we see that there is anxiety, sometimes we deal with the SPD, but they don't get the help they need for the anxiety, and that's very important. The finding is very relevant. I have had experience teaching and supporting children that do not have autism, but showed signs of other challenges such as SPD, and they were given therapy for only one disorder instead of two. And when they were given therapy for each one separately, they improved much faster and much better. Remember, I told you I was a special ed early childhood teacher. Okay. Now let's talk about something that nearly every single person with SPD has to deal with, and that's anxiety. For most people with STD, anxiety comes as a part of a package. It's the bonus prize that nobody wants. SPD and anxiety work together to cause total chaos within the bodies and the brains of the children and people that are dealing with it. They play off each other and they create almost like a spiral effect of symptoms. Strangely, when we talk about children, and this is what I was talking about before, when we talk about children having sensory problems, anxiety is rarely part of the conversation. The focus is always on the sensory part of SPD. It is important to understand that the mayhem that anxiety can cause when teamed with SPD and why it's different from a non-sensory anxiety. Okay. Now, I want you to understand that anxiety is a normal thing that we go through. It's important for us to be able to understand that. So consider this. You wouldn't say to somebody, hey, I know there's a hungry shark in the swimming pool, and every time you've gone in, he's bitten you. But you don't need to be anxious about swimming because if you keep going in, he won't bite you anymore. Yet, when we've been talking to children, I know you have SPD, and saying, I know you have SPD. And every time you go into a sensory unfriendly environment, such as loud environment or bright lights, it's super distressing. I know that, but you don't need to be anxious this time, because if you keep pushing through it, you won't have anxiety anymore. Does that sound like something we really want to do to our kids? So it's not pushing through, it's understanding how they are. The concept of pushing through anxiety often works for regular non-sensory anxiety, like you and I might have. when you were 5 and you went to a birthday party, a person waved a bunch of balloons in your face and you freaked out. And fast forward 10 years later, and you have anxiety whenever you see balloons. This is natural anxiety. To lessen this kind of anxiety, you start to spend time around balloons. You might go into a room where somebody has placed one balloon. Maybe next time you might move a little closer to it. And after you touch one, the balloon-related anxiety slowly improves over time. You are able to push through the anxiety by addressing these irrational thoughts and fears that you experience and replacing them with rational ones. Balloons aren't scary. I do not need to feel anxious around them. I am okay. That is what those of us that don't have SPD can do to relieve anxiety. I'd like to note that when I say regular anxiety, I don't mean less anxiety. Anxiety from a neurological condition like SPD is a different kind of anxiety, not more or less severe than the anxiety from for other people. This is how and why this concept does not work for sensory anxiety. Are you ready? Another scenario. When you were 6 and you went to a birthday party, you are sound sensitive, and during the party, children are popping balloons. It upset you really deeply. Fast forward 10 years, and you have anxiety whenever you see balloons. To alleviate or lessen that kind of anxiety, being around balloons will not reduce your anxious feelings because you still are sound sensitive. The balloons could potentially pop at any time. And if they pop, it will scare you at the same every single time. So when they walk into a room and they see that balloon, they know that there is a possibility and understand that. And that is something that fills their entire being, that it could pop and that noise could happen. And it is so scary for them. Now, why does this happen? The reason people with sensory problems have recurring stubborn anxiety is because many SPDers, how's that? SPDers lack the ability to habituate, which means become accustomed or used to. So become accustomed or used to new information. Their unique sensory systems do not do well with what is referred to as potential stimuli. They like routine and predictability. That makes them feel safe. But a lot of sensory stimuli or input are neither of those things. The world is full of random, unusual, and unpredictable things. And when we have a brain that struggles to make sense of the predictable, let alone the unpredictable, it's easy to understand why anxiety is the result. So we need to be able to understand that if a child is afraid and they have the behaviors that I've been talking about, it may be a true, real anxiety that is along with their SPD or sensory processing disorder. What does sensory anxiety feel like? Let me tell you. When a person has anxiety from sensory issues, it presents itself the same way non-sensory anxiety does. The symptoms are virtually the same. It can be hard to distinguish between sensory overload and anxiety. Some commonly known SPD anxieties might look like this. An SPD and anxiety will cause similar symptoms, which include shaking, trembling, rigid posture, dilated pupils, stomach cramps, even vomiting and diarrhea, excessive sweating, disorientation, dizziness, poor balance and coordination, a flushed face, racing thoughts, sleep problems, shortness of breath, and heart palpitations. These are not things that the children and the people produce themselves. It is what is going on in their brains that is making them feel these ways. The symptoms of sensory anxiety are similar to symptoms of a freeze response. Unless the sensory stimulation or the anxiety reaches the breaking point, people with SPD tend to literally freeze during an anxiety crisis. Have you seen a child that does that? In the middle of being overwhelmed, they just shut down. The meltdown and the shutdown occur after, when they are in a safe place to let it all out. Of course, this doesn't always happen so nicely, and sometimes they find themselves completely disassociated and walled off and about to get sick to their stomach from a fire drill in the middle of the hallway at school, which is really inconvenient, and it's also embarrassing for the child. This is not something that they have control over. This is how they feel. Different strategies to handle. This is SPD and anxiety. Strategies to handle sensory anxiety. Consider the source. To fix and improve sensory anxiety, they have to learn what sensory-related problems give them anxiety in the first place. What is it that causes me to be anxious? They don't want to keep jumping into the swimming pool with the shark, so they might be able to remove the shark before they go swimming. This is important because sometimes if we can help them identify the things that cause them, the cause or what they are doing or experiencing, then maybe we can help them find ways to methods for relieving anxiety when it's tied to sensory issues. Now, I'd like to give you some ideas of things that we can help children learn how to do. They can tell people around them that they have sensory issues or they don't feel well when certain things happen. They need to explain, and we need to help them explain specifically what they struggle with. Is it noise? Is it physical contact? Do they need to have some kind of fidgeting? Do they need to move something in their hands? These are important things to help them understand that they can do things to help them make it known to others that these are things that cause them to have the SPD anxiety. People can't help them remove the shark from the swimming pool if they don't know it's there. Now, this is something that as the children learn, they can tell their families, they can tell you, if they learn how to be able to recognize those things and be able to identify them and communicate them, then we can give them opportunities to not have to deal with those things. Okay, the next statement is we can give them alternatives and allow them to avoid things. It's very much okay to avoid an anxiety-producing event altogether. Perhaps there is another swimming pool where there aren't any sharks. Or perhaps they do not have to swim today. It's very acceptable to turn down an offer to swim if you'll be bitten by sharks or have these reactions. Now, the thing is that remember at the beginning of this training, one of the things that I said was this doesn't happen all of the time. It's unexpected. So when the children are ready to do it, allow them to come in and join. But if they have an issue with this, please give them a way out. All right, the last one is gear up. Sometimes you have to swim with the sharks. You have to do something. So the best thing to do is prepare your physical and emotional state for this encounter. Some sensory anxiety can't be avoided. And when it happens, if we gear up or get ready and help them get ready for their sensory self in the ways that work for them, maybe they need to jump on a trampoline or swing on a swing or spin around and around. It is important to allow them time to do what they need to do ahead of time to prepare for what they are probably going to meet. And we have a few more. Okay, make time to bounce back. This is important. In the event that they do swim with a shark and there is no time to prepare beforehand, it is necessary to dedicate time and energy to letting their sensory anxiety calm down afterwards. Just like preparing beforehand, it's crucial to give them time to bounce back afterwards. Haven't you had time? I have had time where I got mad at my husband and we had an argument, which was usually a silly argument, but I had to calm down. And I just said, just let me calm down first. This is the same feelings, but intensify it, mega intensify that they are feeling. That same, I just need to go and calm down. Experiencing anxiety from having sensory issues is normal, common, and expected. The brain is reacting as any brain would under circumstances. We know that some days the anxiety can be crippling, and other days it can seem like it's on a permanent vacation. Flip-flopping back and forth can be draining and confusing for our children. It can be very draining and confusing because they never know what to expect. Can you imagine never knowing how you're going to feel at any time? Now, typical sensory processing, which is senses, serve a number of purposes. First and foremost, they keep us safe, right? If we are able to feel our senses and then figure out what they mean, they can keep us safe. They tell us that a Frisbee is coming towards our head, for example, and we need to duck. Once we're safe, we can follow up on sensory stimuli and start to learn. This is called discrimination. We can look at people playing Frisbee and teach ourselves what they're doing. So we're going to work on what we've already learned before. So maybe next time we can jump up and catch the Frisbee and start to play. Next, we use our senses for satisfaction. We identify things that are good. We process that in a normal way, and we continue to do things because they bring us joy, right? If I do something and it doesn't make me feel good, it's not something that I might choose to do again. But it's important that I process that earlier. Finally, we need our senses for action. If we plan out what we'd like to do, then combine our senses together to execute what we want to do. And that is using what we have already learned in order for us to be able to process and process that and be able to do something that we feel like we want to do. The problem is, but SPD disorders scramble the messages. These tools, reacting, learning, enjoying, and taking action, are used every moment of our lives. SPD puts all of those everyday functions out of order completely. Ordinary sensory experiences like these we see, feel, and do are processed in an atypical or different way when you have SPD. The term atypical can mean a lot of things in SPD. Perhaps the brain responds late, or perhaps it doesn't respond at all. Perhaps it responds incorrectly, but ultimately they don't respond to their sensory sensory input as they typically should, and that leads to major problems.
Libby?
Yes.
We have a couple of questions.
Okay, great.
So thank you, Delita. She said that she has two students, an 8 and an 11-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And she had her two questions are: one, do you medicate these children? So that's one question. And the other thing is, do they need to work by themselves?
We'll go into it some more, but medication is not something that lay people should make a decision about. Most of them are not medicated because it is about the process that the brain goes through, and it doesn't have anything to do with any kind of chemical reaction in your body. But if an occupational therapist or another professional see something that might be able to help, then that would be something to do. So this isn't something that if I have a cough and a cold, I can take a spoonful of medication. It's something that is in them. It is who they are, and it's important to understand that. And Debbie, I'm sorry, I started talking and I forgot what the second question was.
That's okay. She says, do they need to work by themselves?
I think that allowing, go ahead, what? Oh, I think that allowing them the opportunity to be able to express what's going on inside of them and giving them time, like I said, to have a place. You can offer a place in the classroom or somewhere in the home where they can go to de-escalate the sensory overload that they have and be able to come back. And teaching them those things are part of it. Now, an occupational therapist, I'm going to talk about some activities. We already talked about some activities, but other activities with specific SPD and other things like ADHD and things like that, when it's important for us to understand that they need to have strategies to be able to do that inside themselves. So if they need to have quiet, allowing them to do that, but also giving them, you don't have to make them, you don't have to send them away. And I'll talk about this some more. You don't send them away. You offer them a place where they can go in order to calm down. Just like as the program manager of positive behavior support we had with conscious discipline, they had a place for children to go. Again, we never send a child there. We offer them the opportunity to go there to calm down. But if they're not ready to do that, we need to allow them to be able to decide when they need it, and then honor them and allow them to do what they need to do. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And you had others?
Nope, that was it so far.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'll go on to SPD and hyperactivity. You know what? I can say sensory processing disorder and SPD. I get both of them wrong. There are 3 types of sensory disorders that actually look like ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Those 3 types of sensory disorders, SPD is far from a one-size-fits-all disorder. There are 3 major categories, each with a few subtypes. It's important to remember that the categories are not exclusive. They can interact with each other. So a highly sensitive child with SPD can have symptoms from more than one category or subtype, which can confuse parents and professionals striving to make an accurate diagnosis. So we as humans have come up with these ideas, but their bodies are not always cooperating with what we think they should be doing. The first one is sensory modulation disorder. Sensory modulation is the first category of SPD, and there are 3 subtypes of its own. The first sensory over is sensory over responsivity. We call this child the avoider because she goes out of her way to avoid sensory stimulation by covering her ears, hiding under a desk, or closing her eyes. Her sensory input is too sensitive and everything seems to be too much for her. Do you know that child? The next one is, I'm sorry. The second subtype is under-responsive. This child is a disregarder. This child won't notice what's going on around him, even reality. He just isn't noticing what's happening to his senses. He's overloaded and he won't notice what's going on, even if it's loud and bright and colorful or even an extreme temperature. He just doesn't, he shuts down completely. And the third subtype is sensory craving. This child is known as a seeker and sometimes the bumper and crasher. This child wants sensation, as many as possible. She's a daredevil, climbing on the highest branch or the top of the slide, swinging the farthest on the tire swing. Her sensory input is never enough. She always wants more and more and more. Now that's the first of three. This is the second category. The second category of SPD is difficult if they have a difficult time with sensory discrimination or using their senses to learn. Let's call this child a jumbler. This child struggles to use his senses to make judgments, so even if he's done a task many times before, he goes into it blind each time. He doesn't process it, so he doesn't remember it, so it doesn't stick with him for the next time that he is introduced to the exact same task. If he has to pick up a bucket of water every day, for example, he forgets the information he learned the last time he picked up something up, and he doesn't use his proprioceptive, remember that word, proprioceptive, information to evaluate how much the bucket might weigh, and perhaps he picks it up with too much force and oh my goodness, the water slops out everywhere. Or maybe he may not use enough and he can't get a grip on it. For children, being a jumbler can be embarrassing. They're always messing up simple tasks and are often teased by others. So we need to allow for them to, for other people to understand that sometimes it's okay to make a mistake. You have made mistakes, right? So we don't want to embarrass them, and we want to make sure that we give them we treat them sensitively and caring, and understand who they are and what they're going through inside their bodies. Finally, the third category of SPD is sensory-based motor disorder, and it has two subtypes. The first is postural disorder. And let's call this child the slumper. The slumper has difficulty with movement and moves in a clumsy, disorganized way. He may have difficulty stabilizing himself, and he may struggle to run without tripping over his feet. Kids with postural disorder have difficulty crossing the midline, going from right side with their hand to the left side of their body with their hand, and using hands and feet on one side of their body on the other side. This is something that we need to remember. Those are the two subtypes of SPD and hyperactivity. Have you ever seen this child? Now, what can you do to set up classroom accommodations for sensory processing issues? This is classroom planning, schedules, and routine. Have a daily routine. Teachers that provide consistency and structure in their classroom will make everyone's day flow so much better. The fewer surprises, the better. When I worked with children with just autism without sensory processing, SPD, they needed to know. They needed to have that consistency and structure. And to tell you the truth, I need consistency and structure in my life in order for me to do my job, in order for me to run my house, in order for me to do so many things. All of us need that. So if I need it and you need it, why would I think that we should give the children in our care the same benefit? The next one is build in brain breaks throughout the day. Brain breaks involve movement. Teach children a few different brain break activities and then ask which one they would like to do. Now, these brain breaks can be something as simple as doing Itsy Witsy Spider with the little ones, or doing something. If you see they're starting to move around, this is for the entire class. If you're seeing that the children with SPD are looking overwhelmed, give them a break. Allow them to do something else. so that they can calm themselves down. And this is important that we do that. And it's not difficult, and it doesn't take a lot of time. It's only a minute or two out throughout our day. Don't do it just once that you are in charge of, but allow the children to demonstrate through their behaviors when they need the brain break. When you're in circle time and that little girl, and that's such a sweetie, gets a twinkle in her eye, and you know that havoc is going to start she's going to start wreaking havoc. Get up and do a brain break, and then come back when they're ready to come back and enjoy the activities that you have planned for them. Okay, and it says establish clear starting and ending times for tasks. Using timers are amazing. I love a timer. Make sure it's not loud. Make sure it's a light beep. We don't want to have the loud noises for children that deal with SPD. It isn't, and then guess what happens? I think this is amazing. When I used a timer, I was not the one that was ending the activity. The timer was the one that was including the activity, which means that are they going to go and argue with the timer like they might argue with me as their teacher? No, they're not. They can't. It's an inanimate object. It has no feelings. It has nothing. It says the time is up, so you don't need to argue with me. Okay? Post visual schedules, directions, class rules, and expectations, and make sure the student or the child sees them. In other words, post up a visual schedule. You know what? That is so important, especially for children who don't remember what the process is. Their processing disorder is a problem. But if we have a visual schedule up on our on the wall at their eye level with pictures, they can follow through and see where they are in the process of their day. This will give them peace, more peace. This will give them structure. It will give them consistency. And if something unusual happens, you have the opportunity to stick on the visual schedules something that tells them that something different is going to happen, and they have been warned ahead of time. Now, directions, classroom rules, and expectations, giving them the visuals, as well as that would be like, okay, that would be like if I didn't give you that, if we don't give them that, that would be like me saying, give me your phone, I'm going to erase all of your contacts. That is a visual. That is something that we have in order for us to be able to do what we need to do. Make sure that the children can see those things, and make sure that just like you and I, we need those things, that we allow them to have the same opportunities. And the final one is use visuals with pictures of sensory input choices. And that is in the handout. And there are different things that they can be able to do. And again, I will make sure that you get them. Be sure to say what you mean and to mean what you say. If you say we're going outside in 5 minutes, make sure that the children are outside in 5 minutes. Be sure to review them, the rules and the expectations and the schedules often, so that they can become familiar with them and they will be able to follow them. And especially when a new person comes into the class. Now, these visuals are important also because if a child comes into the classroom and English is not their first language, they will have the pictures to be able to acclimate themselves to the classroom a lot faster. The choice pictures are fun, and all children will love at least some of them, and they will also love being able to have choices. And those are the things that you will be able to see, the choices that I send out to you. They are amazing. So how do we help them build self-regulation skills? We need, this is what I talked about before. We need to provide a quiet space for children to use when they need it. We need, don't send them there. Again, don't send them there, but allow them to go to that place whenever they need it. seat the children that are distracted or cannot focus away from distractions like a door or a window or lights that flicker or buzz. Those are things that could distract them. It is important to, and we can also adjust a chair. This is so simple. We can adjust a chair so the children's feet are flat on the floor and their hips are at a 90-degree angle, and put a footstool under the table or attach a large cardboard box between the front legs of the chair in order to allow that if your chairs are too big for the children. And to tell you the truth, I mean, I'm telling you all the truth anyway, and to tell you, this works for all children that have difficulty sitting. If they're sitting comfortably and they're not feeling like they're out of balance, this is important for many children. And we need to, one of the most important things is that we need to refer children that are having challenges in order to receive services from an occupational therapist that might suggest these two things. An elastic band could be placed on the front of two legs of their chair that they can press against to get that proprioceptive pressure. But these are things that an occupational therapist could give you. So the occupational therapist might also provide noise muffling headphones to help the noise sensitive child to support their ability to attend to what is happening in the classroom. That might be something that they can make the child more comfortable without having to make a big deal about it. What can you do to support and build self-regulation skills? We can work with the child to come up with nonverbal signals to use when they are overwhelmed or in a break. We do this ahead of time. When you start feeling this, wait, sorry. We do this ahead of time so that when the child can tell you when they feel that way, this is what they need, and if they're overwhelmed, so that they can, if they want to and they don't want to be embarrassed, they can tap you on the shoulder or on the hip or on your elbow or something to let you know. Create a proactive behavior plan for handling sensory triggers. If a child is feeling that they're being stressed out, we need to move forward and see, Debbie, you can move that one forward now. Oh, sorry. We can make a behavior plan. Yeah, no, you stay where you are. I'm okay. I'm on the next slide. My computer did it. I'm going to finish this one and then I'll come back to it. Create a proactive behavior plan. How are we going to handle this situation if you become really upset? What are some things that we can do? If you feel like you have triggers, these are things that we can do to support you and have a plan in place so that you're not trying to run around and figure out what's happening at the time. And give advance warning and verbal reminders of loud noises like bells and announcements. I have to tell you, I had children with sensory processing disorders and early childhood children with autism, and they were not allowed to warn us on fire drills. And the amount of meltdowns that I had in my classroom for the rest of the day were unbelievable because of the loud noises that they had to deal with in order to have to walk outside. I worked with the Broward County school system. And provide visuals, again, that the child can use to request and support and have visuals in the classroom to provide structure that they all need. Now that's important. If the child has opportunities to walk over to you and point to them doing certain things, like sitting in that quiet place, or like needing to go and rock somewhere, or whatever it is, if you have pictures of them doing those things, or somebody doing those things that you know help them, then they can go over and request them, even if they're not able to say it because they're so stimulated, they're beyond being able to request it that way. They may be able to use the visuals in order to communicate what their needs are at that point. Now we'll go back. Now, one of the ways we can help build self-regulation skills is asking a child, it is important to understand that children with STD need to have a chance to unwind. I know a child with SPD, and every time her favorite cousin comes to visit, she ramps up her behavior to match her cousins, who is 4 years older than her. And as soon as that beloved person leaves, she is so overstimulated. She has a major, major breakdown. She loses it completely because she has kept herself in control, because she wanted her. She loves her so much that she chooses to try to hold it together while her cousin is around, but in her safe place with her family, she is allowed to be herself, to be who she is. This child is in 2nd grade and is highly successful in a gifted program at her school. These children don't necessarily have academic or an intellectual disabilities, which can be problems sometimes. But social processing disorder, SPD, does not necessarily mean that a child has other cognitive or intellectual issues. Allow the child with SPD, who is probably at least averagely, if not highly intelligent, to continue to learn in your classroom with support and understanding. One of the things that you can do, which I love, I heard this from somebody else, but it's really great. It was a woman who had this, and she had to deal with it when she was a child, and she had an amazing teacher that would ask, that she had set up a system where she would ask the child to carry books or some other heavy item and have them carry them from one place, one classroom to another, and then to another, even when they didn't care where the books were going. And she recruited other teachers to send that child to other classrooms in order for that child to be able to have that time to calm down and to be re-regulate themselves. Or, you know what? Asking them to push a heavy door open that's going to allow them to do the pressure, or to move a stack of chairs, or to give strong hugs or pressure on the shoulders or hands could help them sometimes. You need to know the child. You need to know what their needs are and what they want. Hugs and pressure could be something that really works, or it could be something that doesn't work. It's the exact opposite. It sets them off. Yeah.
Libby, I know we only have a few more minutes left,
Oh.
but we have somebody asked a question,
Okay.
and she said, what can you suggest as a behavior plan when something triggers anxiety?
I would say that would be independent of the child that you're working with. It would be what their needs are, and when you see, be aware of when you see them have a meltdown, what do they do? What do they do to calm themselves? And then as you see them getting started to be escalating, give them the suggestion. I see that you're having difficulty right now, and it looks like you're really in distress. What do you think you can do? Or how about you go over and sit in your quiet space? Or how about you go over and sit by yourself at the table? Or whatever it is that they have already demonstrated that they use to deal with the issues that they have. Does that make sense?
I also would like to just say that we have a team of inclusion specialists that would go out to your, well, now during COVID, we're not going out to the schools quite yet, but you can call, I mean, you can email me if you want. I'm going to put my number in the chat box. And then if you want to, we can send out or contact you, and then we can work on your individual situation individually. Okay?
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps.
That is definitely, that was one of my final slide. So I'm going to go really quick through. For families with the 10 best sports for their different 10 best sports with sensory processing disorder. I'm going to go through them quickly. Swimming, for a great reason. They're doing it by themselves. Martial arts, they're doing it two people at a time, and that's good. And it has them focus on peace and self-control. Wrestling. Wrestling, again, is great because it has intensive resistive muscle activity and is one-on-one. This makes it easier for their child to focus on the activity. Gymnastics is, I do it on my own. Football, believe it or not, I said football, are you kidding me? But football is important. Yoga, obviously, we're centering on ourselves again. Kayaking, again, kayaking is a quiet. The child can sit in one end and you can sit at the other. Hiking and horseback riding is something that they can do and interact with people as much as they want, but not have to do it. Skiing is the same way. If they're older or if they can, being able to ski, and dancing. Dancing is something that they do on their own. Children with STB do not necessarily need to qualify. I'm on the next one. Qualify for special needs and intellect, and that is one of the biggest problems. It is a big problem. They may not qualify for special needs programs, but still there is a need for our understanding of their behaviors because they have a high intellect and they have meeting all the milestones in the areas that at the time. So we support them and make them feel bad or make them feel bad about themselves. We need to do that. I know an amazing child that definitely has SPD. She pushes into people, she tries to lick things in her environment, has had to have sunglasses in order not to cry when she went out into the sun, even when she was a baby. She put things in her mouth that are tactile and comforting, like the shirt and things like that. She had meltdowns when she was overstimulated and continues to show other sensory processing disorders and behaviors. And yet again, she has no issues with cognitive ability with her schoolwork. So it's another way of saying we need to embrace and support them as the amazing, unique individuals that they are. So what is next? I have a fact sheet about sensory processing issues in the handouts, which I will send to you. And if you or a child's family need help with the referral process in Broward County or support in completing a referral form, you and the child's family can contact the inclusion specialist, if you know who that is, or contact Debbie Kay at the Warm Line at 954-736-4308 to receive additional support from the inclusion specialist.
Okay, wait, I do want to clarify, that's not the right number.
Oh,
that Warm Line number is not correct. It's 954-295-0672. Okay, and I will put that in the chat.
Yes.
Okay, I put my email address in the chat as well, so you guys will all get that.
Okay. Okay, and my final statement, I guess I've had questions and I apologize. If you want to email me, my email is Snyder, I have it right here. ESNYDER. I know I told you my name is Libby, but my name is Elizabeth at elcbroward.org. Now the resources, if you want to, I'll leave these up. I have 2 pages, so I'll leave these up so you can take a picture if you want. And it is 8:28. I will stay on for a while just to make sure that Debbie, go on down to the second to the number 38. Oh, there it is. Yeah. That's one of the resource pages. One of the things that I really wanted to make sure that I say is remember, everyone needs to be careful that we do not evaluate any children. There are professionals that are highly trained evaluators that have had extensive training, and we need to leave the final evaluations to them. But if we see that a child is having difficulty, being able to be kind and caring is important, and support them in the best way that we can until they can get more help if they need it. Okay, so that's the first one. And let's move on to the second one. So you'll see that some of the things, the visual, the sensory diet activity suggestions, they're in there. There are also some resources that you can provide to families in order to find support. Okay. Do we still have people here, Debbie?
Okay, let me see. We have one more question. I'm not sure
Okay.
if he's still here. At what age can you detect these behaviors?
Well, like I said, the beginning it's a cumulative thing. When children, if you have the child that I was talking about was an extremely fussy child. She did not like certain things, and I used to see her quite often, and she wouldn't sleep for anybody. But when I sang the same song the same way in a quiet voice, she was able to get herself together and be able to go to sleep. So even as a fussy baby, that is not when we decide to evaluate, but it's a cumulative thing. What happens? Look for the behaviors that stack up one on top of the other, and they don't change. Those are the things that we need to look for to get clues and red flags. Those are the red flags that we see.
Oops. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, are there any other questions? You can type them in the chat. Otherwise, I know it's getting late. You guys probably all had a long day at work.
Yeah. Or at COVID.
Okay, I think we don't have any handouts that they're downloading, so we will be sending out the handouts with your certificates by tomorrow, within 24 hours, okay? And you have our email addresses if you have any questions. Okay, sorry about that. And thank you guys for attending.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Be safe. Have a great night. And wait, thank you, Debbie, for everything that you did, taking good care of me. You're amazing.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Okay.
Okay, you can stop the broadcast when you're ready. It seems like everybody, thank you. A lot of good information, very helpful. So it looks like people gained a lot of good information. Bye, everybody. Thank you for attending. I'll see you next time.
I gotta find where to stop it.
Just on the X, and it'll say,
There you
do
go.